I stood silently by the window of the daily grind, watching Tom and Jessica pull into our driveway in his leased Mercedes SUV. They were laughing, carefree, as she rested her perfectly manicured hand on his arm. My husband of 14 years and his 27-year-old girlfriend were moving boxes into my home. My 5-bedroom colonial in Elmwood Estates with the garden I'd cultivated for a decade. From my vantage point across the street, I could see them clearly while remaining invisible. Jessica's designer bags were being carried by Tom, who puffed slightly from the exertion, something he'd never have admitted to at 42. They paused. At our front door, her lips finding his neck as he fumbled with the keys, both of them giddy with the freedom that my apparent disappearance had granted them. I sipped my chai latte slowly, appreciating the irony. 2 weeks ago, I'd walked out, without a word, no note, no text, nothing. I simply vanished from Tom's life, taking only some clothes and personal items, leaving everything else exactly as it was. What fascinated me was that Tom hadn't filed a missing person report. Not that I'd expected him to. Our marriage had been a performance for years, held together by dinner parties with his colleagues, social media posts of perfect vacations, and the persistent illusion of the ideal power couple. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly he'd install Jessica in my place, as though erasing me from our carefully curated life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Another chai, Rebecca? Megan, the barista who knew me as a regular, appeared at my table. Please, I smiled, keeping my voice casual. And could I trouble you for a slice of that lemon? Cake? Looks divine today. Megan nodded, glancing curiously through the window at my house. Friend of yours live there? Sort of, I said after a moment. It's complicated. Her eyebrows raised slightly. Sounds like there's a story there. There was indeed a story. 15 years in the making. I'd met Tom Mitchell during my second year at Horizon Technologies. I was 24, brilliant but still finding my footing, working 80-hour weeks developing what would eventually become our flagship product. He was 28, already a rising star at Westfield Partners. All perfect suits and practiced charm. We met at a networking event where he was representing clients interested in tech investments. He pursued me relentlessly, impressed by my connections at Horizon, seeing potential not just in me but in what I represented: access to emerging technologies, insider knowledge of a rapidly expanding sector, a partner whose career could complement his own. I fell for his charisma, his ambition that mirrored my own, the way he seemed to value my intelligence. We married within a year, a merger that made perfect sense on paper. Tom had the financial expertise, the connections to wealth management, the polished public persona. I had the technical brilliance, the innovative mind, the understanding of where technology was heading. Together, we seemed unstoppable. For the first 7 years, our arrangement worked beautifully. We bought the house in Elmwood Estates, renovated it to showcase our success, hosted the right people, joined the right clubs. Tom's career at Westfield Partners advanced steadily, vice president by 33, senior account manager by 37. What he never fully understood was that my career was advancing faster, but in ways less visible to his metrics of success. While Tom climbed the conventional corporate ladder, I was revolutionizing Horizon Technologies from within. By 30, I had developed and patented 3 core technologies that became the foundation of our company's meteoric rise. By 34, I was secretly promoted to Chief Innovation Officer, a title I asked to keep confidential to avoid the public spotlight. My compensation package included significant equity in the company, stock options that I exercised strategically, and bonus structures tied to the performance of my innovations. All this I managed through separate accounts, private investments, and financial arrangements that Tom never bothered to understand. Your husband's in finance, right? People would ask me at parties. Yes, I'd answer with practiced humility. He handles all of that for us. Tom loved this arrangement. It fed his ego to be perceived as the financial brain, the provider, the one making our lifestyle possible. Meanwhile, I quietly managed a net worth that eclipsed his many times over. The down payment for our house had come from my first patent bonus. The renovations were funded by my stock options. The property taxes were paid from my private accounts. All while Tom believed his salary and year-end bonuses were what kept our lives afloat. I watched from the coffee shop as Tom and Jessica disappeared into my house, the front door closing behind them. I could picture their tour perfectly. Tom showing off the gourmet kitchen where I'd cooked elaborate meals to impress his clients, the formal dining room where we'd hosted his boss, the master suite with its imported marble and custom closets. All of it paid for by me, all of it claimed by him as manifestations of his success. The first cracks in our facade appeared during year 8 of our marriage. Tom began working later, his explanations growing increasingly vague. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume occasionally clung to his shirts. His phone became a fortress, always face down, always password protected. I noticed the changes immediately, but said nothing. Not out of fear or denial, but strategic patience. I'd seen this pattern before with my mother, who had remained in a similar marriage out of financial dependency, watching helplessly as my father flaunted his affairs before finally leaving her for his secretary when I was 16. My mother had no resources, no career, no leverage. I had vowed never to be in that position. When the signs of Tom's infidelity became impossible to ignore, I didn't confront him with tearful accusations or ultimatums. Instead, I hired a private investigator. Not out of jealousy or even surprise, but to gather information, to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. The reports confirmed everything: dinner meetings that extended to hotel stays, weekend conferences that involved minimal attendance at actual business events. His companion was consistent: Jessica Parker, 27, originally hired as a junior associate at Westfield Partners, now apparently being set up with her own consulting firm, funded through accounts Tom managed. My phone vibrated with a text from Ali, my best friend since college, and the only person who knew my full financial reality. "Surveillance update?" her message read. "They've moved her in completely, looking very domestic," I replied. Ali had been my confidant throughout this process, helping me prepare for what I knew was coming. She'd connected me with Michael Thompson, the most formidable divorce attorney in Lakeside Heights. Together with Diane Wells, my financial advisor, and Ray Cortez, a security specialist recommended by Michael, we had spent months documenting, preparing, and positioning everything for what was about to unfold. What Tom didn't know, what he had never bothered to discover, was that I owned our house outright. My name alone was on the deed, a precaution I'd taken after watching my mother lose everything. Tom had been too busy impressing the real estate agent with market predictions to review the actual paperwork. He assumed his name was on everything because that fit his narrative of our marriage. My gaze returned to the house just as an upstairs light flickered on. Our bedroom. I could imagine Jessica exploring, running her hands over my Egyptian cotton sheets, opening my closets, perhaps suggesting to Tom that they clear out my things. After all, I'd been gone for 2 weeks without a word. Surely I wasn't coming back. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly documenting their every move. I had footage of Jessica's first overnight stay just 2 days after my departure. I had recordings of them bringing in groceries, wine, takeout. I had time-stamped photos of them using my pool, entering and leaving together at hours that made it clear this wasn't a temporary arrangement. All evidence of abandonment of our marital property, of disrespect for our marriage before any formal separation, evidence that would prove valuable very soon. The twist in our story came 3 months ago when Tom was passed over for promotion to managing director at Westfield Partners. The position went to Catherine Donovan, a brilliant strategist with qualifications that exceeded Tom's. He came home furious that night, raging about office politics and gender quotas, unable to accept that Catherine might simply have been the better candidate. His response was to begin spending recklessly. The leased Mercedes upgraded to a more expensive model, custom suits ordered by the dozen, lavish dinners at Harborview Bistro several times a week, and gifts for Jessica, jewelry from Tanner's. On 5th Street, weekend getaways to coastal resorts, a designer handbag collection that grew weekly. Unknown to Tom, I had been tracking every purchase, every account withdrawal, every credit card statement. I watched as our joint accounts dwindled while my separate accounts remained untouched. I observed as he made increasingly risky investments, trying to generate quick returns to support his spending. And I said nothing, allowing him to believe I was still the supportive, somewhat naive wife who trusted his financial expertise implicitly. My phone lit up with another text, this time from Michael Thompson. All paperwork finalized. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ready to proceed on your timeline. Property documentation verified and bulletproof. I replied simply, "Perfect. Proceed as discussed." Sunday evening. 3 days from now, Tom and Jessica would leave for what they thought was a romantic weekend at a lakeside resort. What Tom didn't know was that the resort was less than a mile from the lake house I had purchased 2 years ago, another asset he knew nothing about. They would return Sunday evening to find the locks changed, a security system they couldn't disarm, and legal notices informing them of my ownership and their trespassing. But that was still 3 days away. Tonight, I had dinner with Ali, followed by final preparations with my legal and security teams. I paid my bill at the Daily Grind, leaving a generous tip for Megan, and walked to my Audi sedan. Not the car Tom associated with me, but one I'd purchased through my private accounts months ago as part of my preparation. At Harborview Bistro, Ali was already waiting in a corner booth when I arrived. Her expression was a mixture of concern and admiration as I slid into my seat. "You look unnervingly calm for someone watching her husband move another woman into her house," she observed, pushing a glass of Pinot Noir toward me. "I feel calm," I replied, taking a sip. "Everything is proceeding exactly as anticipated." Ali leaned forward, lowering her voice though we were well away from other diners. "And you're absolutely certain about the house? He can't claim any ownership?" "Absolutely certain. The deed is solely in my name. I paid for it entirely from my separate accounts. Tom's name doesn't appear on a single ownership document." "And he never questioned this arrangement?" Ali asked, though she already knew the answer. I allowed myself a small smile. Tom has always been more interested in appearances than details. As long as he could brag about our address at client dinners, he never bothered to verify whose name was actually on the deed. Ali shook her head, both amused and appalled. "Men like Tom never see women like you coming, do they?" "That's what makes this possible," I replied, studying the menu though I already knew what I would order. "He underestimated me from the beginning, first as an asset, then as an opponent." Our dinner conversation shifted between strategic details and casual catching up, maintaining the appearance of two friends enjoying an evening out. Only when the server was out of earshot did we return to business. "Ray's team is confirmed for Sunday," Ali said, checking her tablet. "Locksmith at 2 p.m., security installation immediately after, legal notices delivered by 4 p.m. Michael will personally oversee everything to ensure there are no missteps." "Perfect," I nodded. "And Diane has completed the financial documentation? Every transaction cataloged, every account verified, every asset properly designated as separate or marital property. Tom's recent spending spree is particularly well documented. The gifts for Jessica, the risky investments, the funds moved to accounts in his name only. If he tries to claim he was building your joint future, we have overwhelming evidence to the contrary." I took another sip of wine, feeling a sense of completion settling over me. Years of careful planning, months of strategic preparation, all culminating in the simple, irrefutable fact that Tom had never bothered to understand the true financial structure of our marriage. "There's more," Allie continued, her expression turning serious. "Diane's team found something concerning about Westfield Partners. They're under investigation by the Securities Commission for potential irregularities in client accounts." This was new information, but it didn't surprise me. The investment industry was under increased scrutiny, and Westfield's aggressive growth targets had always struck me as potentially problematic. "Tom's division?" I asked. Allie nodded. "His name hasn't appeared in any formal documentation yet. But Diane's contact says it's only a matter of time. The investigation is focused on accounts showing unusual patterns of returns, accounts Tom has presented as examples of his success." This explained his increasing desperation, the risky investments, perhaps even his accelerated timeline with Jessica. He was setting up an exit strategy, a new narrative where he was the successful investment guru with the young, admiring partner. "This doesn't change our approach," I decided after a moment's consideration. "If anything, it reinforces the necessity of clean separation now, before any potential financial or legal complications from Westfield could affect me." As our dinner concluded, a final text came from Ray Cortez. "Security sweep complete at both properties. Systems ready for Sunday installation. Surveillance confirms regular patterns of behavior for targets." Everything was in place. 3 days from now, Tom would discover what I had known for years: that our entire marriage had been built on his assumptions and my strategic planning. That while he believed himself to be the provider, the financial expert, the indispensable partner, I had been the one quietly securing our assets, building my career, and preparing for every contingency, including his betrayal. Sunday arrived with perfect clarity, matching my state of mind. I rose early in my temporary apartment, a minimalist space in a secured building downtown that Tom knew nothing about. I completed my usual morning yoga routine, dressed in casual but expensive jeans and a silk blouse, and prepared for the day ahead. By noon, my phone buzzed with the update I'd been waiting for. Targets departing residence, luggage loaded, heading north toward Lake Cedar Resort. Perfect timing. I notified my team with a simple message: proceed. At 2 p.m., the locksmith arrived at my house. By 2:30, new high-security locks had been installed on every entrance. At 2:45, Ray's team began installing the state-of-the-art security system, one that required both a code and biometric verification for entry, with my fingerprints as the only authorized access. At 3:30, Michael Thompson personally delivered and posted the legal notices on all entrances, formal documents, establishing my sole ownership and prohibiting unauthorized entry. By 4 p.m., it was done. My house was secured, the legal boundaries established, and the surveillance system activated to document any attempted violations. I received confirmation photos of each step, reviewing them carefully before sending final approval to Michael. "All preparations complete," he texted. "Security team will remain in position until targets return. Estimated tomorrow evening based on their reservation details." I spent the rest of Sunday attending to normal activities, reviewing work projects for the coming week, having an early dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, preparing my clothes and notes for Monday's executive meeting at Horizon. Nothing in my appearance or schedule would suggest that I was in the midst of reclaiming my life from a husband who had never truly understood who I was. Monday morning arrived with the notification I'd been anticipating. Targets returning to residence. ETA 30 minutes. I settled at my desk in my downtown office, iPad propped discreetly to show the security feeds from my house. Split screens. Displayed the driveway, front entrance, back door, and side gate. Everything was quiet, waiting. At 6:12 p.m., Tom's Mercedes turned into the driveway. I watched as he and Jessica emerged, laughing about something, completely unaware of what awaited them. They unloaded their weekend bags from the trunk, and Tom led the way to the front door with the confidence of a man who believes he owns his surroundings. The first hint of trouble came when his key failed to turn in the lock. I observed his confusion, the repeated attempts, the growing frustration. Jessica said something, pointing at the door. Tom stepped back, finally noticing the legal notice prominently posted at eye level. Even without audio, I could track the progression of his reaction, confusion giving way to disbelief, then anger. He ripped the notice from the door, holding it closer to read in the evening light. Then he crumpled it, throwing it to the ground before pulling out his phone. On cue, my phone began to ring. Tom's name and photo appeared on the screen. I declined the call and watched as he tried again immediately. After the third attempt went to voicemail, the texts began. "What the hell is going on? Why are the locks changed? Call me right now. Rebecca, this isn't funny. Open the damn door. If this is about Jessica, we can talk. Just answer your phone." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that the legal notices hadn't already communicated. On the security feed, Tom's next move was predictable. He stormed around to the back door, Jessica trailing behind, only to find it similarly secured with another legal notice. His body language conveyed his escalating rage. The tight shoulders, the clenched fists, the agitated pacing. When he returned to the front yard, he was already calling someone else, likely a locksmith. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. The security system Ray had installed was registered with all local locksmith services. Any legitimate business would refuse the job once they ran the address through their system and saw the legal hold. Sure enough, Tom's expression confirmed my prediction. Whoever he was speaking to had clearly declined his request. He ended the call with visible anger, then immediately dialed again. Same result, judging by his reaction. Jessica appeared to be growing uncomfortable, hugging herself as the evening air cooled. She said something to Tom, who snapped back at her before returning to his futile attempts to contact me. By the 10th call, all sent straight to voicemail, Tom had progressed to pounding on the front door and shouting. The security team texted an update. Subject becoming volatile. Neighbors taking notice. Security prepared to intervene if necessary. I texted back, hold positions unless property damage occurs or physical threats made. Just as I sent this instruction, Tom appeared to have a new idea. He returned to his car, rummaged through the trunk, and emerged with what looked like a tire iron. Before he could approach the house, however, a police cruiser turned onto the street, slowing as it neared my property. One of the neighbors must have called in a disturbance. The perfect development. The officers approached Tom, who was still holding the tire iron. A brief conversation ensued, during which I could see Tom gesturing wildly at the house, likely claiming it was his home, and he was locked out. One officer examined the legal notice while the other spoke into his radio, presumably running the address to check property records. The encounter ended exactly as I had anticipated. The officers clearly informed Tom that the property was registered solely in my name, that the legal notices were valid, and that any attempt to enter without permission would constitute criminal trespassing. They instructed him to remove his vehicle from the driveway and leave the premises. Tom's fury was evident even on the small screen. The red face, the aggressive stance, the finger pointing. But against uniformed officers with clear property records, his rage was impotent. Eventually, he stormed back to his car, Jessica hurrying behind him with their weekend bags. As they drove away, I received a final text from the security team. Subjects departing area. Officers remaining to file incident report. All documented. I set down my phone and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Phase 1 complete. What Tom would discover over the coming days was that his life had been built on assumptions I had strategically allowed him to make. He would learn that our house had always been solely mine. He would realize that I had been the financial foundation of our marriage from the beginning. He would understand too late that the quiet, supportive wife he had underestimated had been 3 steps ahead of him all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Ali. "Just saw the security feed. Perfectly executed. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate?" I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. The real work begins now." Within minutes, Tom's final desperate message arrived. "You won't get away with this. You have no idea what you're up against. This is my house too." I felt no anger reading this, no vindictive pleasure, only a calm recognition of the inevitable collision between Tom's illusions and reality. I typed a single reply, the only communication I would offer him until our lawyers met formally. "Check the property deed, Tom. You never owned a thing." Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and settled in to review the product launch I would be leading at Horizon next month. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new strategies to implement. But tonight, I savored this small victory, the first public move in a game that had been silently unfolding for years. Tom had always underestimated me. By the time this was over, he would never make that mistake again. Our dinner conversation shifted between strategic details and casual catching up, maintaining the appearance of 2 friends enjoying an evening out. Only when the server was out of earshot did we return to business. "Ray's team is confirmed for Sunday," Ali said, checking her tablet. "Locksmith at 2 p.m., security installation immediately after, legal notices delivered by 4 p.m. Michael will croix. Personally, oversee everything to ensure there are no missteps." "Perfect," I nodded. "And Diane has completed the financial documentation?" "Every transaction cataloged, every account verified, every asset properly designated as separate or marital property. Tom's recent spending spree is particularly well documented. The gifts for Jessica, the risky investments, the funds moved to accounts in his name only. If he tries to claim he was building your joint future, we have overwhelming evidence to the contrary." I took another sip of wine, feeling a sense of completion settling over me. Years of careful planning, months of strategic preparation, all culminating in the simple, irrefutable fact that Tom had never bothered to understand the true financial structure of our marriage. "There's more," Ali continued, her expression turning serious. "Diane's team found something concerning about Westfield Partners. They're under investigation by the Securities Commission for potential irregularities in client accounts." This was new information, but it didn't surprise me. The investment industry was under increased scrutiny, and Westfield's aggressive growth targets had always struck me as potentially problematic. "Tom's division?" I asked. Ali nodded. "His name hasn't appeared in any formal documentation yet, but Diane's contact says it's only a matter of time. The investigation is focused on accounts showing unusual patterns of returns, accounts Tom has presented as examples of his success. This explained his increasing desperation, the risky investments, perhaps even his accelerated timeline with Jessica. He was setting up an exit strategy, a new narrative where he was the successful investment guru with the young, admiring partner. This doesn't change our approach, I decided after a moment's consideration. If anything, it reinforces the necessity of clean separation now, before any potential financial or legal complications from Westfield could affect me. As our dinner concluded, a final text came from Ray Cortez. "Security sweep complete at both properties. Systems ready for Sunday installation. Surveillance confirms regular patterns of behavior for targets." Everything was in place. 3 days. From now, Tom would discover what I had known for years, that our entire marriage had been built on his assumptions and my strategic planning. That while he believed himself to be the provider, the financial expert, the indispensable partner, I had been the one quietly securing our assets, building my career, and preparing for every contingency, including his betrayal. Sunday arrived with perfect clarity, matching my state of mind. I rose early in my temporary apartment, a minimalist space in a secured building downtown that Tom knew nothing about. I completed my usual morning yoga routine, dressed in casual but expensive jeans and a silk blouse, and prepared for the day ahead. By noon, my phone buzzed with the update I'd been waiting for. Target's departing residence, luggage loaded, heading north toward Lake Cedar Resort. Perfect timing. I notified my team with a simple message: proceed. At 2 p.m., the locksmith arrived at my house. By 2:30, new high-security locks had been installed on every entrance. At 2:45, Ray's team began installing the state-of-the-art security system, one that required both a code and biometric verification for entry, with my fingerprints as the only authorized access. At 3:30, Michael Thompson personally delivered and posted the legal notices on all entrances, formal documents, establishing my sole ownership and prohibiting unauthorized entry. By 4 p.m., it was done. My house was secured, the legal boundaries established, and the surveillance system activated to document any attempted violations. I received confirmation photos of each step, reviewing them carefully before sending final approval to Michael. All preparations complete, he texted. Security team will remain in position until target's return. Estimated tomorrow evening based on their reservation details. I spent the rest of Sunday attending to normal activities, reviewing work projects for the coming week, having an early dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, preparing my clothes and notes for Monday's executive meeting at Horizon. Nothing, in my appearance or schedule, would suggest that I was in the midst of reclaiming my life from a husband who had never truly understood who I was. Monday morning arrived with the notification I'd been anticipating. Target's returning to residence, ETA 30 minutes. I settled at my desk in my downtown office, iPad propped discreetly to show the security feeds from my house. Split screens displayed the driveway, front entrance, back door, and side gate. Everything was quiet, waiting. At 6:12 p.m., Tom's Mercedes turned into the driveway. I watched as he and Jessica emerged, laughing about something, completely unaware of what awaited them. They unloaded their weekend bags from the trunk, and Tom led the way to the front door with the confidence of a man who believes he owns his surroundings. The first hint of trouble came when his key failed to turn in the lock. I observed his confusion, the repeated attempts, the growing frustration. Jessica said something, pointing at the door. Tom stepped back, finally noticing the legal notice prominently posted at eye level. Even without audio, I could track the progression of his reaction. Confusion giving way to disbelief, then anger. He ripped the notice from the door, holding it closer to read in the evening light. Then he crumpled it, throwing it to the ground before pulling out his phone. On cue, my phone began to ring. Tom's name and photo appeared on the screen. I declined the call and watched as he tried again immediately. After the third attempt went to voicemail, the texts began. "What the hell is going on? Why are the locks changed? Call me right now. Rebecca, this isn't funny. Open the damn door. If this is about Jessica, we can talk. Just answer your phone." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that the legal notices hadn't already communicated. On the security feed, Tom's next move was predictable. He stormed around to the back door, Jessica trailing behind, only to find it similarly secured with another legal notice. His body language conveyed his escalating rage, the tight shoulders, the clenched fists, the agitated pacing. When he returned to the front yard, he was already calling someone else, likely a locksmith. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. The security system Ray had installed was registered with all local locksmith services. Any legitimate business would refuse the job once they ran the address through their system and saw the legal hold. Sure enough, Tom's expression confirmed my prediction. Whoever he was speaking to had clearly declined his request. He ended the call with visible anger, then immediately dialed again. Same result. judging by his reaction. Jessica appeared to be growing uncomfortable, hugging herself as the evening air cooled. She said something to Tom, who snapped back at her before returning to his futile attempts to contact me. By the 10th call, all sent straight to voicemail. Tom had progressed to pounding on the front door and shouting. The security team texted an update. Subject becoming volatile. Neighbors taking notice. Security prepared to intervene if necessary. I texted back, hold positions unless property damage occurs or physical threats made. Just as I sent this instruction, Tom appeared to have a new idea. He returned to his car, rummaged through the trunk, and emerged with what looked like a tire iron. Before he could approach the house, however, a police cruiser turned onto the street, slowing as it neared my property. One of the neighbors must have called in a disturbance. The perfect development. The officers approached Tom, who was still holding the tire iron. A brief conversation ensued, during which I could see Tom gesturing wildly at the house, likely claiming it was his home. And he was locked out. One officer examined the legal notice while the other spoke into his radio, presumably running the address to check property records. The encounter ended exactly as I had anticipated. The officers clearly informed Tom that the property was registered solely in my name, that the legal notices were valid, and that any attempt to enter without permission would constitute criminal trespassing. They instructed him to remove his vehicle from the driveway and leave the premises. Tom's fury was evident even on the small screen. The red face, the aggressive stance, the finger pointing. But against uniformed officers with clear property records, his rage was impotent. Eventually, he stormed back to his car, Jessica hurrying behind him with their weekend bags. As they drove away, I received a final text from the security team. Subjects departing area, officers remaining to file incident report, all documented. I set down my phone and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Phase 1 complete. What Tom would discover over the coming days was that his life had been built on assumptions I had strategically allowed him to make. He would learn that our house had always been solely mine. He would realize that I had been the financial foundation of our marriage from the beginning. He would understand too late that the quiet, supportive wife he had underestimated had been 3 steps ahead of him all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Allie. Just saw the security feed. Perfectly executed. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. The real work begins now. Within minutes, Tom's final desperate message arrived. You won't get away with this. You have no idea what you're up against. This is my house too. I felt no anger reading. This, no vindictive pleasure, only a calm recognition of the inevitable collision between Tom's illusions and reality. I typed a single reply, the only communication I would offer him until our lawyers met formally. Check the property deed, Tom. You never owned a thing. Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and settled in to review the product launch I would be leading at Horizon next month. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new strategies to implement, but tonight, I savored this small victory, the first public move in a game that had been silently unfolding for years. Tom had always underestimated me. By the time this was over, he would never make that mistake again. Morning arrived with the expected deluge. 23 missed calls from Tom, 37 text messages ranging from threats to pleas to accusations, and 4 voicemails that progressively declined in coherence and increased in volume. There were also updates from Michael Thompson. Tom had contacted 3 separate law firms overnight. 2 had declined to represent him after preliminary research into the property records. The third, Grayson and Marks, known for aggressive litigation regardless of merit, had scheduled a consultation for 10 a.m. I forwarded this information to Ali, who responded immediately. G&M has conflicts with 2 Horizon board members. 1, call from me, and they'll drop him faster than last season's tech stock. I considered this option briefly before declining. Let him waste his retainer on futile consultations. More evidence of poor judgment. My professional inbox included an urgent message from Tom demanding I call him immediately to sort out this misunderstanding. His corporate email, which I still had access to through channels he'd never bothered to secure, showed frantic messages to colleagues seeking recommendations for real estate attorneys and temporary housing options. Most telling was an exchange with his direct supervisor. Need emergency personal leave today. Family situation requires immediate attention. The response was not what Tom had likely hoped for. Request noted. Be advised the executive committee is meeting at 11 a.m. regarding division audit findings. Your presence is mandatory. Tom's world was collapsing on multiple fronts simultaneously, exactly as I had anticipated. By the end of today, he would be facing not just the loss of his home and marriage, but potentially his career as well. I dressed with particular care for my own day, selecting a power suit in burgundy that projected confidence and control. Today, I would lead Horizon's quarterly innovation review, where my team would present the technologies that would define our market position for the next fiscal year, a professional triumph that would cement my position for years to come. As I applied my makeup, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Tom had always defined our success as a couple through his achievements, his career advancement, his client, relationships, his social connections. He had never fully appreciated that my quiet competence, my strategic vision, my technological innovations were the true foundation of everything we had built. Now, he would learn that lesson the hard way, as everything he thought was his crumbled beneath him, and everything that was truly mine remained rock solid. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Court filing prepared, ready to proceed on. Your command. When would you like to serve him? I considered the timeline carefully before responding. Wait until after the Westfield Partners announcement. Maximum impact. Michael's reply was immediate and appreciative. Strategically sound. We'll prepare accordingly. I slipped my phone into my purse and headed out, ready to face the day, ready to move forward with the next phase of my carefully orchestrated plan. Tom thought yesterday's locked door was the battle. He had no idea it was merely the opening. Move in a much larger war, one he had already lost before it even began. The Horizon Quarterly Review proceeded exactly as I'd anticipated. Unanimous approval for the 3 new technologies my team had developed, enthusiastic support for the market strategy I'd crafted, and excited murmurs about the potential stock, appreciation when our innovations hit the market next quarter. Exceptional work, Rebecca, CEO James Harrington said as we exited the conference room. The precision of your technical roadmap continues to impress everyone. The board is particularly pleased with how you've positioned us ahead of market demands. Thank you, I replied with a modest smile. It's simply a matter of anticipating variables and planning accordingly. If only he knew how broadly that philosophy extended beyond my professional life. Back in my office, I found 7 more missed calls from Tom and a text from Michael. G&M declined representation after consultation. T now attempting to secure Wallace & Reed. Wallace & Reed, a mid-tier firm known for taking cases others rejected. Their reputation was built on aggressive tactics rather than legal brilliance. They'd be expensive and ultimately ineffective, but they might create temporary complications. I forwarded this information to Ali, who responded almost immediately. W&R represents 2 vendors currently negotiating major contracts with Horizon. Potential conflict. Want me to make a call? Again, I declined the assistance. Let him proceed. More financial damage, more desperate decisions. My professional mask remained firmly in place as I conducted afternoon meetings, reviewed department budgets, and finalized quarterly projections. No one at Horizon would have guessed that I was simultaneously orchestrating the systematic dismantling of my marriage and my husband's carefully constructed facade. At 3:17 p.m., a breaking news alert flashed across my computer screen. Federal. authorities raid Westfield Partners' offices. Attached was aerial footage of dark-suited SEC agents entering the gleaming downtown headquarters where Tom had built his career. My phone buzzed immediately with a text from Ali. Happening now. 4 senior partners taken in for questioning. Diane says Tom's division specifically mentioned in warrants. I allowed myself exactly 5 seconds to process this development. Before responding, time to accelerate our timeline. Contact Michael. Events were unfolding faster than even I had projected. The federal investigation had moved from quiet inquiry to public action, and Tom was now caught in a perfect storm. Personal betrayal exposed, professional misconduct under investigation, legal options dwindling, and financial resources under scrutiny. I sent a brief message to Michael. Move forward with divorce filing tomorrow morning. Maximum media coverage. His response was equally concise. Documents prepared. 9 a.m. filing. For maximum news cycle impact. Coordination with financial press arranged. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Tom would be dealing with the fallout from the federal raid while simultaneously being served with divorce papers outlining his infidelity, financial misconduct, and false claims to property ownership, all while scrambling for new accommodations and legal representation. As the workday ended, I maintained my usual routine, reviewing final emails, organizing my desk for tomorrow, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues as I departed. No one would see anything unusual in my demeanor or schedule. Maintaining normal patterns was crucial to controlling the narrative that would inevitably emerge once news of my divorce filing became public. In my car, I checked the tracking app one final time. Tom's location showed him still at Westfield Partners' offices, presumably being questioned by federal agents or desperately trying to salvage client relationships. Either way, he was occupying exactly the position I needed him in: distracted, defensive, and diminished. Instead of returning to my temporary apartment, I directed my car toward a different destination: the house. My house. For the first time since implementing my plan, I would return to reclaim the space that had been temporarily invaded by Tom and Jessica. The security team had been notified of my arrival, and they verified my identity as I approached. The new locks responded to my key, the new security system to my biometric data. Stepping across the threshold felt like reclaiming territory, not just physical space, but the psychological ground that Tom had attempted to colonize with his betrayal. Inside, the house looked much as I had left it 2 weeks ago, with subtle differences that spoke volumes about the brief occupation. Jessica's designer coat hung in the entryway closet. A different brand of coffee sat on the kitchen counter. 2 wine glasses remained in the sink from their pre-weekend departure. I moved methodically through the rooms, noting each intrusion, each alteration. In the master bedroom, Jessica's clothes hung alongside mine in the closet, her designer dresses nudging against my tailored suits as if they belonged there. Her cosmetics cluttered the bathroom vanity I had always kept meticulously organized. Most telling was the nightstand on what had been Tom's side of the bed: a woman's novel, a pair of reading glasses that weren't mine, a different brand of hand cream than I used. Jessica hadn't just visited. She had begun establishing permanence, claiming space, settling in. The guest bedroom had been converted to a makeshift office for Tom. His laptop docking station, dual monitors, and stacks of financial reports arranged with the precision he always insisted on for his workspace. A bottle of his preferred scotch sat half empty on the antique side table that had been my grandmother's. I took photographs of everything, additional evidence for the divorce proceedings should it become necessary. Then I began the process of reclamation. Jessica's clothes were removed from the closet, folded neatly, and placed in the designer luggage she had left in the corner of the room. Her toiletries were gathered from the bathroom, wrapped in tissue paper, and added to the suitcase. Every trace of her presence was methodically erased, not with anger, but with the same clinical efficiency I brought to technical innovations at Horizon. Tom's personal items received similar treatment. business clothes segregated from casual wear, shoes paired and placed in their original boxes, cufflinks and watches secured in their cases. His files were organized chronologically, electronic equipment disconnected and packed properly. Even his scotch was recorked and added to the collection. By the time I finished, 6 perfectly packed suitcases and storage containers lined the foyer. Everything Tom and Jessica had brought into my house, ready for their removal. Nothing damaged, nothing destroyed, nothing missing. I had erased their presence without diminishing any possessions they could claim as their own. The final touch was a printed notice placed atop the luggage. Personal items ready for retrieval. Contact Thompson, Chen & Associates to arrange supervised collection. Any attempt to enter property without prior arrangement will be considered trespassing and prosecuted accordingly. As I completed this task, my phone buzzed with another news alert. Westfield Partners trading suspended. SEC cites irregular activities in managed accounts. Accompanying the headline was a stock photo of the firm's executive team from last year's annual report. Tom stood at the edge of the group, smiling confidently in his bespoke suit, unaware that the image would now be used to illustrate his firm's downfall. I forwarded the alert to Michael with a simple question. Impact on timeline? His response was immediate. Proceeding as planned. 9 a.m. filing. Media already monitoring courthouse for financial crimes developments. Our filing will provide additional context they'll eagerly report. Perfect. The business press would be primed to connect Tom's professional misconduct with his personal failures. The narrative would write itself. Senior investment executive under federal investigation, also accused of marital infidelity and attempted property theft. His credibility would be destroyed on all fronts simultaneously. I spent that night in my reclaimed home, sleeping in freshly made beds with new linens I'd brought with me. The security team remained stationed outside, ensuring no unexpected visits disturbed my first night back in my own space. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. At 8:45 a.m., Michael texted, "En route to courthouse. Filing prepared with expedited processing request." At 9:12 a.m., filing complete. Court has assigned case number. Initial hearing date request submitted for earliest available slot. At 9:37 a.m., process server en route to Westfield Partners. Offices with divorce papers. Media alerted to significant development in ongoing financial investigation. I monitored these developments from my Horizon office, maintaining my normal Tuesday schedule of team meetings and innovation reviews. To all outward appearances, I was simply the efficient, focused chief innovation officer everyone had come to rely upon. No one would connect me to the breaking news story until I chose to reveal that connection. At 10:53 a.m., the text I'd been waiting for arrived from Michael. Papers served. T received documents in front of colleagues and federal investigators. Maximum impact achieved. I could picture the scene perfectly. Tom being handed legal documents while already under scrutiny from federal authorities. His professional mask cracking as he realized the papers outlined not just divorce proceedings, but detailed allegations of infidelity, financial misconduct, and false property claims. His colleagues watching his composure shatter. The federal investigators noting his emotional response for future reference. By noon, the story had broken across multiple financial news outlets. Westfield Partners executive served with divorce. Papers amid federal raid. One particularly thorough reporter had already connected the dots. Court records show investment director's wife owns property he claimed as marital asset. Tom's professional and personal collapse was now public knowledge, his humiliation complete and documented, just as I had planned. My phone began ringing incessantly. Calls from Tom, from unknown numbers likely reporters, from mutual acquaintances curious about the breaking story. I declined them all, maintaining my focus on Horizon business as if nothing unusual was occurring. Allie appeared in my office doorway just after my last scheduled meeting, closing the door behind her. "It's everywhere," she said without preamble. "Every financial news outlet, local stations, even some national coverage because of the SEC angle. Tom's face is all over the business channels." I nodded, unsurprised. "Has he attempted to contact you?" "3 calls in the past hour," Allie confirmed. I didn't answer. Horizon Legal Counsel has no comment on the personal matters of employees' spouses, and James Harrington has called an emergency executive session for 3 p.m. They'll want reassurance that this won't impact Horizon operations or your innovation pipeline. I glanced at my watch. I'll prepare a statement addressing potential concerns. Allie studied me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're remarkably calm for someone whose divorce has just become breaking news. This is merely the implementation phase of a plan that's been in development for months," I replied. "Everything is proceeding as anticipated." The Horizon executive session was brief and focused. I presented a concise overview of my personal situation, emphasizing that my financial holdings were entirely separate from Tom's, that the house and all major assets were solely in my name, and that the divorce proceedings would not impact my professional responsibilities or Horizon's technological roadmap. The timing of these revelations is unfortunate, but ultimately beneficial, I concluded. With everything now in the open, there will be no lingering questions or concerns that might distract from our work going forward. James Harrington voiced the executive team's unanimous support, noting that my characteristic foresight in keeping my financial affairs separate from Tom's demonstrated the same prudence I brought to managing Horizon's technological resources. By the time I left Horizon that evening, 3 significant developments had occurred. First, Westfield Partners had announced the immediate suspension of 6 executives, including Tom. Second, the SEC had filed formal charges against the firm for securities fraud, market manipulation, and fiduciary negligence. Third, Tom had been photographed by news crews leaving the firm's offices with a cardboard box of personal items, the universal symbol of unceremonious termination. As I drove home, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered through the car's Bluetooth system. "Rebecca." Jessica's voice, unexpectedly steady despite the circumstances. "I believe my attorney has provided instructions for retrieving your personal items," I replied, maintaining the same professional tone I would use with a difficult vendor. "This isn't about clothes or toiletries," she said, an edge creeping into her voice. "This is about Tom, about what you're doing to him." I allowed a moment of silence before responding. "What I'm doing to him. Interesting perspective." "He's being destroyed professionally because of your timing," Jessica continued. "You could have filed for divorce any time. You deliberately coordinated with the SEC investigation to maximize damage." "An intriguing theory," I conceded, slowing for a red light, though it presumes I have influence over federal regulatory agencies. "Don't play innocent," Jessica snapped. "I've worked in financial firms long enough to recognize a coordinated attack. You've been planning this for months." "And you've been sleeping with my husband for months," I countered, my voice remaining calm. "Perhaps longer. Your professional insights should have warned you about the risks of associating with someone like Tom, personally and professionally." A pause then. "What do you want? Money? Some sort of revenge? What would it take to end this scorched earth campaign?" The light turned green, and I accelerated smoothly. "I already have what I want, Jessica. My house, my assets, my reputation, intact. Tom's actions, professional and personal, have consequences. He's experiencing them now, as are you by association." "You cold, calculating," she hissed. "No," I corrected her. "Methodical, strategic, forward-thinking. The qualities Tom once claimed to value in me before he decided a younger, more compliant companion would better serve his ego." Another pause, longer this time. When Jessica spoke again, her voice had changed, less confrontational, more calculating. What if I have information? Things Tom told me about your finances, about Horizon's dealings, things that might interest certain investigators. There it was, the threat beneath the anger. I smiled slightly, though she couldn't see it. That would be ill-advised for 2 reasons, I replied. First, any financial insights Tom shared with you were likely fabrications, designed to impress you with his non-existent acumen. And second, false allegations to regulatory agencies are themselves prosecutable offenses, as I'm sure you're aware from your extensive experience in financial firms. I could almost hear her recalculating, trying to find leverage that didn't exist. Retrieval of your personal items can be arranged for tomorrow between 2 and 4 p.m., I continued. A representative from Thompson, Chen and Associates will be present to supervise and document the process. If that time frame doesn't work for you, alternative arrangements can be discussed with my attorney. Good evening, Jessica. I ended the call before she could respond, satisfied that another potential complication had been neutralized. Jessica might be angry, but she was also strategic enough to recognize a losing position when she found herself in one. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Ali's car already parked by the curb. She was waiting on the front steps, holding a bottle of champagne, and wearing an expression that mixed concern with celebration. I thought you might need company tonight, she explained as I approached. The news coverage is intensifying. They've connected the divorce filing to the SEC investigation, and they're digging into Tom's background, previous relationships, everything. I unlocked the door, disarming the security system with my fingerprint. Was that your doing? Ali shook her head as we entered. This is pure journalistic feeding frenzy. Financial scandal plus personal betrayal equals ratings gold. They're running with it without any encouragement needed. In the kitchen, I gathered glasses while Ali opened the champagne. The quiet domesticity of the moment contrasted sharply with the public storm surrounding Tom's downfall. Have you seen the footage? Ali asked, pouring the champagne. Tom being escorted from the building? It's all over the business channels. I shook my head. I've been focused on Horizon matters. Ali pulled out her tablet and navigated to a news site. The video played automatically. Tom emerged from the Westfield Partners building, jacket collar turned up against the cameras, ignoring reporters' shouted questions as he hurried toward a waiting taxi. His face was ashen, his normally perfect appearance disheveled. The cardboard box in his arms contained framed photos, what looked like industry awards, and what appeared to be his prized collection of fountain pens. They're saying he's facing potential criminal charges, Ali commented, accepting the glass I offered her. Securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly even racketeering implications if they can prove he knew about the larger scheme. And his attorney prospects? I asked. Dwindling by the hour. 4 more firms have declined to represent him since this morning. Apparently, no one wants to be associated with what they're calling the Westfield Six. I raised my glass in a small toast. To consequences. Ali clinked her glass against mine. To meticulous planning. We settled in the living room, the house now fully reclaimed as my own space. Tom and Jessica's personal items were neatly packed and waiting in the foyer, a visual representation of their ejection from my life. Jessica called me on my way home, I mentioned casually. She attempted to threaten me with supposed financial information Tom shared with her. Ali sat up straighter. That's concerning. What specifically? Nothing substantive, I assured her. A desperate attempt to gain leverage. I reminded her that fabricating allegations to regulatory agencies carries its own legal risks. Still, Ali said, her legal mind already assessing potential threats. We should document the call. It could constitute attempted extortion depending on the precise wording she used. I nodded in agreement. I'll have the car's call recording. System download the audio file. Michael should have it for his records. As the evening progressed, we discussed next steps. The initial divorce hearing scheduled for the following week. The media strategy for addressing inevitable questions. The security measures still in place to prevent any unauthorized visits. From Tom. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You have no idea what's coming. I showed the message to Ali, who immediately took a screenshot. Documented threat. I'll forward it to Michael and the security team. He's desperate, I observed. His professional reputation destroyed, his personal life exposed, his financial resources dwindling. Desperation leads to mistakes, which is exactly what we anticipated. Ali nodded. Each reckless action or threat simply strengthens your position. By the time Ali left, we had refined the strategy for the coming days, maintaining my professional composure at Horizon, documenting any contact attempts from Tom or Jessica, proceeding methodically with the divorce filing while the Westfield partners' investigation unfolded in parallel. Alone in my reclaimed house, I conducted one final walkthrough before retiring for the night. Every room now restored to my preferred order, every intrusion removed, every space reclaimed, the physical manifestation of the larger reclamation taking place in my life. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a final update from Michael. Court date confirmed for next Monday. Judge Eleanor Winters assigned as anticipated. T has secured representation from Delaney Group, final firm willing to take his case. Limited resources, questionable strategy. I responded with a simple acknowledgement, then set my phone aside. Everything continued to unfold according to plan. Tom scrambling to secure subpar legal representation, the divorce proceedings advancing on our preferred timeline, the media connecting all the unsavory elements of his professional and personal conduct. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new challenges to navigate. But tonight I would sleep peacefully in my own bed, in my own home, secure in the knowledge that Tom's belated education about property deeds, financial independence, and the consequences of betrayal was proceeding exactly as designed. Morning arrived with new developments, some expected, some surprising in their timing, but not their substance. The first notification came from the security team. T attempted property. Access at 5:47 a.m. Appeared intoxicated. Verbal confrontation with security personnel. Departed when police were mentioned. Full report and video forthcoming. The second was a news alert. Westfield Partners Managing Director charged in federal probe. 6 others named as co-conspirators. Tom's name appeared fourth on the list of those charged. The third was from Michael. Emergency motion filed by T's new counsel requesting immediate access to marital property and assets. Hearing scheduled for 2 p.m. today. Your presence requested but not required. Ali called as I was reviewing. These updates. Have you seen the morning news? They're calling it the biggest financial fraud case since Madoff. Tom's facing up to 20 years if convicted on all counts. I've seen it, I confirmed, already mentally adjusting my schedule to accommodate the unexpected court hearing. More pressing is his attorney's emergency motion this afternoon. Standard desperate tactic, Ali assessed. They'll claim he needs access to marital property for documents relevant to his defense. Judge Winters won't be sympathetic, especially given the property deed and his documented infidelity. I'll attend nonetheless, I decided. Better to appear reasonable and cooperative with the court, even as we maintain our position. The morning proceeded with careful coordination, rescheduling Horizon meetings, briefing Michael on the latest developments, reviewing security footage of Tom's early morning attempt to access the property. The video was particularly illuminating. Tom, clearly intoxicated, arguing with the security personnel stationed discreetly in an unmarked car near the property. His appearance was shocking, unshaven, wearing what appeared to be the same clothes from yesterday, his normally perfect, hair disheveled. The transformation from polished investment executive to desperate, intoxicated trespasser had occurred in less than 48 hours. More telling was his behavior. The wild gesticulations, the finger-pointing, the visible rage. At one point, he actually attempted to push past the security officer, only backing down when informed that police would be called immediately if he took one more step toward the house. I forwarded the video to Michael with a note. Additional evidence of erratic behavior for this afternoon's hearing. His response was immediate. Perfect timing. We'll incorporate into our response to emergency motion. By 1:30 p.m., I was seated beside Michael in the county courthouse, reviewing our strategy for the emergency hearing. Tom had not yet arrived, though his newly retained counsel, a junior partner from the Delaney Group, was frantically organizing documents at the opposite table. They're going to argue he needs immediate access to financial records stored at the house, Michael explained quietly. Records supposedly crucial to his defense in the federal case. Records that don't exist, I noted. All our financial documentation is either with our accountant or in my secure cloud storage. Michael nodded. Exactly. But they're desperate for any foothold, any excuse to get him back into the house where he might claim partial residence rights. At 1:52 p.m., Tom finally appeared, escorted by a different attorney than the one preparing at the defense table. This second lawyer appeared to be briefing him rapidly as they approached, likely explaining procedures and limitations. The transformation in Tom's appearance was stark even from yesterday's news footage. His bespoke suit hung awkwardly as if he'd lost weight overnight. Dark circles underlined his eyes, and his normally perfect grooming had given way to stubble and visible disarray. When he noticed me, he froze momentarily, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, anger, and something approaching fear before settling into forced composure. The younger attorney guided him to their table, whispering urgently as Tom continued staring in my direction. I maintained a neutral expression, meeting his gaze briefly before returning my attention to the documents Michael was reviewing. The message was clear. I was composed, prepared, and completely unmoved by his presence. Judge Eleanor Winters entered precisely at 2 p.m., and the bailiff called the court to order. The proceedings began with Tom's counsel presenting their emergency motion, arguing that critical financial documents needed for his federal defense were located in the marital home, and that my sudden and unexplained reclaiming of the property constituted an attempt to withhold evidence relevant to his case. Michael listened patiently, making occasional notes but otherwise displaying complete confidence in our position. When it was his turn to respond, he approached the bench with measured steps. Your Honor, we're prepared to address each claim individually. But first, let me clarify several fundamental misrepresentations in opposing counsel's motion. He proceeded to systematically dismantle their arguments, presenting the property deed showing my sole ownership, documentation of Tom's infidelity, including his moving another woman into my house, evidence that all relevant financial records were either with our accountant or in secure digital storage accessible to both parties, and finally, the security footage from that morning showing Tom's intoxicated attempt to access the property. Far from withholding evidence, Michael concluded, my client has simply secured her legal property from unauthorized access after documented intrusion. Mr. Mitchell's professional difficulties are entirely separate from this divorce proceeding, though his attempts to conflate them suggest a concerning pattern of misrepresentation. Judge Winters, known for her no-nonsense approach, addressed Tom's attorneys directly. Counselors, is there any evidence that documents exclusively related to Mr. Mitchell's federal case, not marital finances, not personal records, but specifically his defense against federal charges, are physically located in this property and nowhere else? The junior attorney glanced nervously at his senior colleague before responding. Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell believes certain documents and electronic records are stored there that would be beneficial to his defense. That wasn't my question, Judge Winters noted dryly. I asked for evidence that crucial defense materials exist exclusively in that location. We don't have specific inventory, Your Honor, but— Motion denied, Judge Winters interrupted. The property is clearly in Ms. Mitchell's name only. Mr. Mitchell's unauthorized use of it to house his paramour, followed by his documented intoxicated attempt to access it this morning, demonstrates precisely why supervised access is appropriate. She turned to Michael. Mr. Thompson, your client has already arranged for the organized retrieval of Mr. Mitchell's personal belongings, correct? Yes, Your Honor. All personal items have been carefully packed and are available for supervised retrieval at scheduled times. Then that arrangement shall continue, Judge Winters ruled. Mr. Mitchell may schedule supervised access to retrieve his belongings, but he may not reside in or freely access the property. Furthermore, this court will not entertain additional emergency motions without substantive new evidence. With a final bang of her gavel, the hearing concluded. A complete victory for our position. Tom sat stunned at the defense table while his attorneys whispered urgently, likely explaining the implications of the ruling and attempting to develop an alternative strategy. As Michael and I gathered our materials to leave, Tom suddenly stood and approached our table, ignoring his attorney's attempts to restrain him. Rebecca, he said, his voice pitched low but intense. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. Michael immediately stepped between us. Mr. Mitchell, all communication should be through counsel. I suggest you return to your attorneys. This is between me and my wife, Tom insisted, attempting to move around Michael. Ex-wife, I corrected, him calmly, meeting his gaze directly. And Michael is right. We have nothing to discuss outside of legal proceedings. Something in Tom's expression shifted, the facade of control cracking to reveal the desperation beneath. You don't understand what you're doing, he hissed. The damage you're causing to me, to my career, to my life. I understand exactly what I'm doing, I replied, maintaining the same calm tone. Just as you understood exactly what you were doing when you moved your girlfriend into my house, when you depleted our joint accounts, when you lied about your firm's activities. His face flushed with anger. You self-righteous. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Winters' voice cut through the tension. She was still at the bench, observing the exchange. I strongly advise you to step away and allow Ms. Mitchell and her counsel to depart. Any further attempts at unauthorized communication will be noted in the court record. Tom's attorneys finally managed to pull him back, whispering urgently as they guided him toward the exit. The defeated slump of his shoulders contrasted sharply with his attempted intimidation moments earlier, a visual representation of his rapidly diminishing power. As Michael and I left the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid potential media, he remarked, his behavior today only strengthens our case. To approach you like that, attempting intimidation in front of the judge, it's the kind of impulsive action that destroys credibility. It's also predictable, I noted. Tom has always reacted poorly to losing control. The more pressure applied, the more erratic his behavior becomes. Which is exactly why your strategy has been so effective, Michael acknowledged. Each loss compounds the next, increasing his desperation, leading to further missteps. Back. In my car, I checked my phone to find multiple updates waiting. The federal charges against Westfield Partners had expanded to include potential criminal conspiracy. Tom's assets had been frozen as part of the investigation. And most significantly, a reporter had uncovered Jessica's employment history at another firm previously investigated for similar violations. The narrative was evolving exactly as anticipated, Tom's professional conduct and personal betrayal merging into a single story of spectacular downfall. And I had orchestrated every aspect of it, from the timing of my disappearance to the reclaiming of my house, from the divorce filing to the court appearances. As I drove away from the courthouse, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Tom had always underestimated me, my intelligence, my foresight, my capacity for strategic patience. Now he was learning the true cost of that miscalculation. One devastating revelation at a time. The next 2 weeks unfolded with the precision of a meticulously choreographed performance. Each day brought new developments in Tom's professional and personal collapse, while I maintained my carefully crafted equilibrium. By Thursday morning, 7 days after the initial court hearing, the Westfield Partners scandal had expanded beyond anyone's initial projections. 3 senior partners had accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony against the others. The SEC had frozen all executive assets pending further investigation, and Tom's name appeared prominently in every article about the firm's fraudulent activities. "They're calling it a classic Ponzi scheme with a modern twist," Ali explained during our weekly lunch. "Using client funds to cover trading losses, falsifying returns, creating shell accounts to hide the money flow. The federal prosecutor is comparing it to Madoff's operation, just on a smaller scale." I sipped my sparkling water, absorbing this information with practiced composure. "And Tom's specific involvement?" According to the latest filings, he personally managed several of the fraudulent accounts. They have documentation showing he knew about the discrepancies for at least 18 months. Coincidentally, around the time he began his affair with Jessica. That timing wasn't coincidental, of course. Financial pressure and personal betrayal often moved in tandem, each feeding the other in a downward spiral of increasingly poor decisions. "Speaking of Jessica," Ali continued, lowering her voice though we were seated in a private corner of the restaurant, "did you see this morning's business section? They've connected her to 3 different firms that faced regulatory action. Always as an executive assistant to a director later charged with financial improprieties, always departing just before investigations became public." I hadn't seen the article, but the pattern aligned with my own research into Jessica's employment history. "They're suggesting she was somehow involved in the schemes," Ali shrugged. "Nothing that direct yet, but they're certainly implying she has a habit of forming relationships with executives engaged in questionable practices. Whether she's an accomplice or simply has terrible judgment in men remains unclear. The distinction wouldn't matter much for Jessica's future employment prospects. Association with multiple financial scandals effectively ended careers in the investment world, regardless of personal culpability. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. T's attorney requesting settlement conference. Apparently, federal counsel advised resolving divorce quickly to focus on criminal defense. This development was earlier than anticipated, but not unwelcome. Tom's legal resources were stretched thin between the criminal charges and divorce proceedings. Settling the latter would allow him to concentrate on the former, a practical decision his attorneys had likely been pushing for days. I responded, simply, "What terms are they proposing?" Michael's reply came moments later. "None yet. Floating the concept only. Shall I schedule preliminary discussion?" After brief consideration, I texted back, "Proceed, but maintain all current positions on property and assets." The strategic advantages of a settlement were considerable. A negotiated agreement would avoid protracted court battles, prevent any unexpected judicial rulings, and most importantly, provide a clean, definitive end to my connection with Tom. The criminal proceedings against him might drag on for years, but our divorce could be finalized and behind me in a matter of weeks. "Good news?" Ali asked, noting my slight smile. "Potentially. Tom's counsel is requesting settlement discussions." Ali raised an eyebrow. "That was faster than we projected. His resources must be even more limited than we thought." "The federal case takes precedence," I noted. "His attorneys are likely advising him to simplify where possible." "And will you agree to settlement talks?" "Of course. A clean resolution benefits me as much as him, provided the terms reflect reality. Reality being that I owned the house outright, that my financial assets were properly segregated from his, and that his infidelity and financial misconduct had been thoroughly documented. Any reasonable settlement would acknowledge these facts rather than contest them." As lunch concluded, I received another text from Michael. Meeting scheduled for tomorrow, 10 a.m. T will not attend personally. Counsel only. Perfect. Negotiating. With attorneys, rather than Tom directly, would keep emotions removed from the proceedings, allowing for more efficient resolution. The fact that Tom wouldn't be present suggested his lawyers had recognized his volatility as a liability in negotiations. The rest of the day proceeded according to my carefully maintained schedule: Horizon Innovation meetings, review of the quarterly technology roadmap, routine administrative tasks that anchored my professional identity regardless of personal circumstances. By evening, another significant development had emerged. The business press had uncovered connections between specific fraudulent accounts at Westfield Partners and offshore entities linked to Tom personally. The implications were damning, not just professional misconduct within the firm, but potential personal enrichment through deliberately deceptive practices. Michael called as I was reviewing these reports. "Have you seen the latest?" "Just reading it now," I confirmed. "This changes our settlement approach," he noted. "If these offshore accounts are verified, they would constitute hidden assets subject to discovery in divorce proceedings. Unless we agree not to pursue them as part of a settlement," I pointed out. Michael paused, then chuckled softly. "And this is why you're my favorite client." "Yes, exactly. We now have additional leverage for tomorrow's discussion. How would you suggest we proceed?" "Let them make the initial offer," Michael advised. "I suspect it will be surprisingly generous given these new revelations. They'll want to avoid any additional financial scrutiny from our forensic accountants, which could potentially uncover evidence relevant to the criminal case." The strategy was sound. By allowing Tom's counsel to establish initial terms, we would gain insight into what they were most concerned about protecting or concealing. That information itself had value beyond any specific dollar amount they might propose. The settlement conference the following morning validated this approach entirely. Tom's attorneys, now expanded to include a specialist in white-collar criminal defense, proposed terms that were indeed surprisingly favorable. They conceded full ownership of the house, which was already legally mine, acknowledged the separation of financial assets, and even offered a substantial cash settlement to expedite proceedings and provide closure for both parties. This last element was particularly telling. Tom had no legal obligation to provide additional funds beyond returning any marital assets he might have appropriated. A voluntary cash settlement suggested strongly that his legal team feared what further financial investigation might uncover. Michael received their proposal with professional neutrality, promising to review the terms with me and respond within 48 hours. As soon as we were alone in his office, however, his poker face gave way to a satisfied smile. "They're terrified of financial discovery," he observed, highlighting specific clauses in the settlement agreement. These waivers of further accounting, the expedited timeline, the non-disclosure provisions, all designed to prevent our forensic accountants from examining his finances further. I reviewed the document carefully, noting the generous terms alongside the restrictive clauses. The cash settlement is significantly higher than we anticipated. "Blood money," Michael said bluntly. "They're hoping you'll take it and walk away without asking questions about where it came from or what else might be hidden. And if we countered by demanding full financial disclosure instead of accepting the settlement." Michael leaned back in his chair, considering. "It would delay the divorce proceedings, potentially by months. Any information we uncovered would likely be shared with federal prosecutors through discovery requirements. Tom's criminal exposure would increase significantly." I weighed these options carefully. The settlement offered immediate closure and substantial financial compensation. Further investigation promised potential satisfaction in seeing Tom face additional consequences, but at the cost of prolonging my own connection to him and his misdeeds. Draft a counteroffer, I decided. Accept the general framework, but increase the settlement amount by 30%. Add provisions for retrieval of any remaining personal items from the house, and include strict non-contact requirements going forward. Michael nodded approvingly. They'll accept. The additional amount is significant but not prohibitive, and the non-contact provisions benefit Tom as much as you at this point. He was right. By that evening, Tom's counsel had agreed to our counteroffer with minimal negotiation. The final settlement included the increased financial compensation, comprehensive non-contact provisions, and an expedited timeline for finalizing all documentation. The divorce would be complete within 10 days, assuming the judge approved the settlement terms, which Michael assured me was virtually certain given the circumstances and Judge Winters's previous rulings. As I left Michael's office that evening, a notification appeared on my phone, a news alert with Tom's name in the headline, "Westfield Partners Executive Released on $2 million Bail, Passport Surrendered." The attached article included a courthouse, photograph of Tom leaving his bail hearing. The transformation was shocking even to me. In just 2 weeks, he had aged a decade. The polished, confident investment director had been replaced by a haggard, defeated figure in an ill-fitting suit. Photographers captured him shielding his face from cameras, shoulders hunched, escorted by grim-faced attorneys on either side. Most telling was the complete absence of Jessica in any recent coverage. According to Allie's sources, she had left the city 3 days ago, her destination unknown. Whether she had abandoned Tom to his fate or been advised to distance herself from the case remained unclear. Either way, his personal and professional support systems had evaporated simultaneously. The following week passed in a blur of paperwork, signatures, and final arrangements. The divorce settlement was submitted to the court, reviewed by Judge Winters, and approved with remarkable efficiency. Tom's attorneys pushed for immediate processing, likely under instruction to resolve the divorce before additional criminal charges might complicate matters further. On a crisp Thursday morning, Michael called with the news I had been waiting for. "It's done. The judge signed the final decree this morning. You are officially divorced." The words landed with surprising gentleness, not the dramatic climax one might expect after months of strategic planning, but rather the quiet conclusion of a necessary business transaction. "Thank you," I said simply, "for everything." "My pleasure," Michael replied, professional but warm. "The final settlement has been transferred to your account. The title to the house has been re-registered with additional notations confirming sole ownership. All legal notifications have been sent to relevant parties, and the non-contact provisions are in full effect immediately. Any attempt by Tom to contact you directly would constitute violation of a court order, potentially resulting in additional legal consequences." Another loose end neatly tied. Tom would not be appearing on my doorstep or calling my phone in desperate attempts to negotiate or manipulate. The legal barriers were now as firm as the emotional ones I had constructed months ago. That evening, Allie arrived at my house with an expensive bottle of champagne and a small, elegantly wrapped package. "To commemorate the occasion," she explained as I welcomed her inside. We settled in the living room, now redecorated to my personal preferences rather than the compromise style that had characterized my marriage to Tom. The new furniture, artwork, and color scheme reflected my aesthetic completely. No concessions, no accommodations for anyone else's taste. Allie raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings, clean breaks, and bulletproof property deeds." I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. "And to thorough preparation." "Open your gift," she urged, after we had each sipped the excellent champagne. The small package contained a beautiful silver paperweight, elegantly engraved with a single word, "Prevail." "It seemed fitting," Allie explained. "Not just surviving, but prevailing, coming through stronger than before." I turned the paperweight in my hand, appreciating both the sentiment and the craftsmanship. "It's perfect. Thank you." As we enjoyed the champagne, Ali updated me on the latest developments in Tom's case. 3 more executives had accepted plea deals, each implicating him in increasingly serious violations. His bail conditions had been tightened after prosecutors expressed concern about potential flight risk, and the offshore accounts connected to him were now under scrutiny by international financial crime units. They're projecting a minimum 10-year sentence if he's convicted on all counts, Ali noted. Possibly more depending on what the offshore investigation uncovers. I absorbed this information with the same cool detachment I'd maintained throughout the process. Tom's fate was no longer connected to mine in any way. His choices had led him to this point, just as my choices had led me to mine. And professionally? Ali asked, changing the subject. The Horizon board remains supportive. More than supportive, I confirmed. Our newest technology launch exceeded projections by 22%. The quarterly performance review was exemplary, and James Harrington has hinted at potential advancement opportunities in the coming year. My professional success continued uninterrupted, perhaps even enhanced by the contrast between my composed handling of personal challenges and Tom's spectacular implosion. Where his career lay in ruins, mine continued its steady upward trajectory, built on the solid foundation of competence rather than deception. After Ali departed, I moved through my reclaimed home with a sense of peaceful completion. Each room now reflected only my preferences, my choices, my vision. No traces of Tom remained. All his belongings had been removed, all evidence of his temporary occupation erased. In my home office, I opened the secure file I had maintained throughout this process, a detailed documentation of Tom's betrayal, my strategic response, and the ultimate resolution. The final entry would be made tonight, closing this chapter, permanently. As I typed the concluding notes, a news alert appeared on my computer screen. Federal prosecutors expand Westfield case. New evidence suggests international money laundering. Tom's world continued to collapse, the consequences of his actions multiplying beyond even my careful projections. But that story was no longer connected to mine. I had extricated myself completely, protecting what was mine while allowing him to face the natural repercussions of his choices. I completed my final entry, saved the file, and closed the document. Then I activated the secure deletion protocol I had established months ago, systematically removing all traces of my documentation from any potentially discoverable source. The record of my strategy existed now only in encrypted backups accessible solely to me, insurance against any future attempts to rewrite this history. 1 year later, I stood at the window of my executive office on the top floor of Horizon's new headquarters. The expansion project I had spearheaded was now complete, ahead of schedule and under budget. My promotion to Chief Technology Officer had been announced the previous month, culminating years of strategic career advancement. The morning's business news had included a small item about Tom's sentencing: 12 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets, and restitution payments that would extend well beyond his release. Jessica had reportedly testified against him as part of her own immunity agreement, revealing that their relationship had begun not as a romantic connection, but as a strategic partnership to conceal financial misconduct. I felt no satisfaction in this news, no vindictive pleasure in Tom's downfall. Those emotions had burned away long ago, replaced by the cool clarity that had guided me through each phase of my response to his betrayal. What remained was simply recognition of natural consequences. His actions had produced precisely the results that should have been expected. My assistant knocked lightly on the open door. "Your 10 bus is here, Ms. Mitchell, the venture capital team for the new AI platform." "Thank you, Jennifer. I'll be right there." I gathered my presentation materials and took one last look at the view from my window. The city spread out below, opportunities extending in every direction. My house remained my sanctuary. My career continued its ascent, and my life proceeded on the path I had carefully constructed. Tom had moved his girlfriend into my house, never bothering to read the deed that would have revealed his vulnerability. That single act of carelessness, born of arrogance, entitlement, and underestimation, had set in motion the complete dismantling of his carefully constructed facade. I closed my office door and headed toward the conference room, my steps measured and confident. The past was properly archived, its lessons incorporated, but its hold released. Ahead lay possibilities limited only by my vision and determination. A future built on the solid foundation of knowing exactly what I owned, what I was worth, and what I was capable of achieving. Tom had learned those facts too late. I had known them all along. The succession announcement was scheduled for the December shareholder meeting, exactly as planned. In the intervening weeks, I managed a careful balance between my current responsibilities as CTO and preparation for the expanded role. Each day presented new challenges and opportunities to refine the vision I would implement as CEO. Today marked a significant milestone in that transition, my first official strategy session with the full executive team as incoming CEO. I had spent weeks preparing, analyzing every division's performance metrics, identifying optimization opportunities, and mapping technological innovation paths that would secure Horizon's market dominance for the next decade. I arrived early, reviewing my presentation one final time in the empty boardroom. The wall of windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, the morning sun glinting off glass towers that housed our competitors and collaborators. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. A clear view of the landscape I would soon navigate from a position of unprecedented influence. James entered first, his confident stride unchanged despite his impending retirement. "Morning, Rebecca. Ready for the troops?" "Always," I replied with a small smile, appreciating his characteristic blend of professionalism and warmth. In many ways, James had been the ideal CEO to work under, demanding excellence but recognizing achievement, strategic in his thinking but willing to take calculated risks on promising innovations. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, pouring himself coffee from the sideboard. "Have you given any thought to the Gardner Foundation proposal? Their educational initiative aligns remarkably well with some of the ideas you've mentioned." The Gardner Foundation, Professor David Grant's educational organization, which I had researched thoroughly after our unexpected encounter. Their program providing scholarships and mentorship to underprivileged students in STEM fields had proven impressively effective, with metrics showing extraordinary outcomes for participants. "I've reviewed their proposal in detail," I confirmed. "Their results are compelling, and the strategic alignment with our talent pipeline initiatives is evident. I'm considering a modified version of their proposal with expanded funding and deeper integration with our internship programs." James nodded approvingly. "I thought you might see the potential there. David Grant has built something remarkable, with limited resources. With Horizon's backing, the impact could be transformative." "You know Professor Grant personally?" I inquired, maintaining a neutral tone despite my curiosity. "We serve on the university's engineering advisory board. Together," James explained. "Brilliant mind, uncompromising integrity. Rare combination these days." He paused, studying me with unexpected intentness. "You've met him, I believe?" "Briefly," I acknowledged, wondering how he had learned of our encounter. He returned, a lost item after the symphony last month. James smiled slightly but didn't elaborate, turning instead to greet the other executives now entering the boardroom. The moment for further discussion had passed, but I made a mental note to revisit the foundation proposal with fresh perspective. The strategy session proceeded exactly as I had envisioned. I presented a comprehensive 3-year plan that balanced aggressive technological innovation with practical implementation timelines and conservative financial projections. The approach was methodical yet visionary, building on Horizon's established strengths while pushing boundaries in quantum computing, advanced AI applications, and secure cloud architecture. This is precisely the roadmap we need. Vernon Matthews, the board chairman commented as I concluded. Ambitious yet achievable, with clear metrics for each milestone. The board will be extremely pleased with this direction. The executive team's response was similarly enthusiastic, each division head recognizing how their departmental objectives integrated into the larger vision. Even Marcus Reynolds, our sometimes contentious CFO, acknowledged the financial prudence underlying the ambitious technological goals. I'm particularly impressed with the educational initiatives, noted Elaine Winters, our Chief People Officer. The proposed partnership with the Gardner Foundation addresses our talent pipeline challenges, while creating meaningful social impact. It's strategically sound and aligns with the values we want to project. I nodded acknowledgement, having anticipated this reaction. The foundation partnership represented a perfect alignment of practical advantage and positive perception. Expanding our access to exceptional talent while enhancing our corporate image as a responsible industry leader. The Gardner proposal is still being refined, I noted. I plan to meet with Professor Grant next week to discuss potential enhancements to the original concept. As the meeting concluded, I felt a quiet satisfaction with the reception of my strategic vision. The executive team's alignment would be crucial during the transition, particularly as we implemented structural changes needed to support our ambitious growth targets. James lingered as the others departed, his expression thoughtful. Excellent presentation, Rebecca. You've clearly given this considerable thought. Thank you, I replied simply. A solid foundation is essential for what we're building. He nodded, then surprised me with an unexpected observation. You know, watching you today reminded me of something. When I was about your age, taking over as CEO, I was entirely focused on strategy, metrics, optimal execution, all the elements you've mastered so thoroughly. Essential components of effective leadership, I noted. Absolutely, he agreed. But what I couldn't appreciate then was how the personal connections, the human elements that can't be quantified or strategically optimized, would ultimately prove equally valuable. The relationships built on genuine understanding rather than strategic advantage. I considered his words carefully. Throughout my career, I had approached relationships primarily as tactical elements within larger strategies, useful alliances, beneficial connections, advantageous partnerships. Even my marriage to Tom had been evaluated through this lens, its dissolution managed with the same strategic precision as its formation. An interesting perspective, I acknowledged, though difficult to quantify in terms of measurable outcomes. James smiled. That's precisely the point. Not everything of value can be measured or strategically planned. Sometimes the most significant developments emerge from unexpected human connections. He checked his watch. Speaking of which, I believe you have a lunch meeting with the university delegation? Yes, regarding the expanded research partnership, I confirmed, gathering my materials. Professor Grant will be among them, James mentioned casually. He's leading the quantum computing collaboration. This was unexpected information. My planned meeting with the Gardner Foundation was scheduled for the following week. This additional interaction hadn't been part of my carefully structured timeline. I wasn't aware he was involved in that project, I remarked, maintaining my professional composure despite the slight disruption to my expectations. David's expertise in quantum mechanics is actually what brought him to architectural engineering, designing physical environments that can support quantum computing requirements. His theoretical work is quite revolutionary. I made a mental note to review Professor Grant's research publications before the lunch meeting. Thorough preparation had always been my foundation for successful interactions, particularly when circumstances introduced unexpected variables. I'll look forward to discussing the collaboration with him and the rest of the delegation, I said, moving toward the door. James nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. I suspect you'll find the conversation illuminating on multiple levels. The university delegation was already assembled in our executive dining room when I arrived precisely at noon. 4 distinguished academics and administrators, all focused on expanding the research partnership that had already yielded significant advances in quantum computing architecture. Professor Grant was immediately recognizable among them, his tall figure and attentive posture, distinctive even in this accomplished group. He rose with the others as I entered, his expression revealing a momentary surprise before settling into professional cordiality. "Ms. Mitchell," Dean Richardson greeted me. "Thank you for making time in your schedule. We're excited about the potential for deeper collaboration between Horizon and the university." "The pleasure is mine," I replied with practiced ease. Horizon values its academic partnerships, particularly in emerging technologies where theoretical foundations and practical applications must evolve together. The initial conversation flowed smoothly, covering funding structures, intellectual property considerations, and integration of university researchers with Horizon's development teams. Throughout, I noted Professor Grant's contributions: insightful, precisely articulated, and refreshingly free of academic posturing. His understanding of both theoretical quantum mechanics and practical implementation challenges was impressive, revealing depths not evident in our brief previous encounters. Professor Grant's architectural approach to quantum computing environments represents a significant breakthrough, Dean Richardson noted. His designs have increased coherence times by 47% while reducing environmental interference factors previously thought insurmountable. Impressive results, I acknowledged, genuinely interested in the technical achievement. I'd be interested in reviewing the methodological approach that led to such improvements. I'd be happy to share our research, Professor Grant offered. Though I should note that your quantum computing team, particularly Dr. Lin, made substantial contributions to the stabilization protocols. It's been a genuinely collaborative effort. His willingness to share credit struck me as unusual in academic circles, where territorial claims on breakthrough research were often fiercely defended. This generosity of attribution aligned with James's assessment of his character: brilliant, mind, uncompromising integrity. As lunch progressed, the conversation shifted to the broader implications of quantum computing for society, moving beyond technical considerations to ethical frameworks and educational preparation for the coming technological revolution. This is precisely why educational initiatives like your foundation are so crucial, I noted, addressing Professor Grant directly. Expanding access to advanced STEM education ensures we're developing the diverse talent pool needed for these emerging fields. He looked momentarily surprised that I was familiar with his foundation work. "You've reviewed our programs?" "Thoroughly," I confirmed. "In fact, I've been considering a potential partnership between Horizon and the Gardner Foundation. Your results with scholarship recipients are exceptional, and your mentorship approach appears particularly effective." "That's unexpected," he admitted, "but certainly intriguing. The foundation operates on limited resources, so corporate partnership could significantly expand our impact." "Perhaps we could discuss the possibilities further," I suggested. "I've already scheduled a meeting with your foundation next week, but if you're available after this lunch concludes, we might begin the conversation today." Dean Richardson exchanged a knowing glance with his colleagues. "I believe we've covered the essential university matters, Ms. Mitchell. If you and Professor Grant wish to discuss his foundation work, we wouldn't want to delay such a promising opportunity." And so, as the lunch meeting concluded, I found myself in the unexpected position of having a private meeting with Professor Grant, an interaction I had anticipated, but not in this accelerated time frame. Adaptability had always been among my strengths, however, so I smoothly pivoted to this adjusted schedule. "Shall we move to my office?" I suggested. "We'll have more privacy to discuss potential collaboration." As we walked through Horizon's gleaming headquarters, I observed Professor Grant's interest in the architectural elements of the building, the way light was captured and distributed, the thoughtful flow of shared and private spaces, the integration of nature within the technological environment. "This is extraordinary design work," he noted. "The balance between openness and focused work areas is particularly well conceived." I was heavily involved in the architectural planning, I acknowledged. The physical environment significantly impacts innovation and collaboration. Every element was carefully considered for its effect on both. "Strategic optimization of environmental factors," he observed with a slight smile. "Yet there's something more here, an aesthetic sensibility that transcends pure functionality. The atrium garden, for instance, serves no obvious productive purpose, yet clearly enhances the space immeasurably." His observation was unexpected. Few people noted the careful balance I had insisted upon between efficiency and human experience in the building's design. Tom certainly never had, despite my extensive involvement in the project during our marriage. "Beauty has its own functionality," I responded as we reached my office, particularly in creative environments. My assistant Jennifer looked up in surprise as we arrived. "Professor Grant?" she acknowledged with a warm smile. "Lovely to see you again." "You've met?" I inquired, not recalling any interaction between them during his previous visit. "Professor Grant volunteers with the weekend STEM program my daughter attends," Jennifer explained. "She's absolutely thriving there, particularly in the robotics workshops. Mia has remarkable aptitude for engineering design," Professor Grant noted. "She's developing a biomimetic robotic hand that shows genuine innovation." The personal connection was unexpected, another variable outside my careful mapping of professional relationships and strategic alliances. Yet it revealed another dimension of Professor Grant that aligned with his foundation work, a genuine commitment to educational development that extended beyond institutional programs to individual mentorship. In my office, I outlined the partnership concept I had been developing, expanded funding for the Gardner Foundation, integration with Horizon's internship pipeline, and technological resources to enhance their educational programs. The proposal was comprehensive, strategically sound, and mutually beneficial. Professor Grant listened attentively, asking incisive questions about implementation details and long-term sustainability. His focus remained consistently on the educational impact rather than institutional advantage, a perspective that contrasted with my more strategic approach yet complemented it in unexpected ways. "Your proposal is extremely generous," he acknowledged as I concluded, "and clearly well considered from multiple angles. Before proceeding, however, I feel I should address something." His tone shifted slightly, becoming more personal. "My foundation means a great deal to me, Ms. Mitchell. It's not simply a professional project, but a deeply personal mission. Before we formalize any partnership, I'd like to understand what motivates Horizon's interest beyond the obvious talent pipeline. Benefits." The question was direct, bypassing the corporate positioning I had prepared to offer. It invited a level of personal disclosure I rarely provided in professional contexts. Yet something about his straightforward approach and evident integrity prompted an equally honest response. "My mother raised me alone after my father abandoned us," I found myself explaining. "She worked multiple jobs to ensure I received educational opportunities she never had. Her sacrifice made my career possible. Creating similar pathways for others has personal significance beyond the strategic advantages." The disclosure was brief, but more revealing than I typically allowed in professional settings. Professor Grant's expression reflected his recognition of this fact. "Thank you for sharing that," he said simply. "It helps me understand the partnership in a more complete context." Our discussion continued, moving between practical implementation details and broader philosophical considerations about educational access and technological innovation. Throughout, I noted a quality in our interaction that differed from my typical professional exchanges. a genuine intellectual engagement uncomplicated by competitive positioning or strategic maneuvering. "I believe we have the foundation for an extraordinary partnership," Professor Grant concluded as our meeting approached its end. "Would you be available to visit one of our program sites next week? Seeing the students and mentors in action would provide valuable context for how Horizon's resources could be most effectively deployed." The suggestion represented another deviation from my typical approach. I generally preferred controlled environments for professional interactions rather than field visits where variables couldn't be as precisely managed. Yet I found myself intrigued by the opportunity to observe the Foundation's work directly. "I could arrange that," I agreed. "Perhaps Wednesday afternoon?" "Perfect. I'll host a small reception afterward with some of our graduate scholars. Many of them would make excellent candidates for Horizon's advanced development teams." As he rose to leave, Professor Grant paused, his expression becoming more personal. "May I ask you something that isn't directly related to our partnership, Ms. Mitchell?" I nodded, curious about this unexpected turn. "The photograph I returned to you, your graduation with your mother, it clearly means a great deal to you. Would you tell me her name? I'd like to acknowledge her contribution to our partnership, even if only in conversation between us." The request was startlingly personal, yet offered with such genuine respect that I found myself answering without hesitation. Eleanor Mitchell. She believed education could transform lives because it transformed hers, even though she never had the opportunity to complete her degree. "Eleanor," he repeated thoughtfully. "Well, I believe Eleanor Mitchell would be extraordinarily proud of what you've accomplished and what you're making possible for others through this partnership." The comment touched something rarely accessed in my carefully compartmentalized emotional landscape. For a moment, I allowed myself to consider how my mother might view my life's trajectory. The professional achievements, certainly, but perhaps also the calculated approach to relationships and strategic management of personal connections that had characterized my path. "Thank you, Professor Grant," I said, maintaining my professional composure despite the unexpected emotional resonance his comment had evoked. "I look forward to seeing your Foundation's work next week." "Please, call me David," he offered with a genuine smile. "I think our partnership will benefit from moving beyond formalities." "David, then," I acknowledged. "And I'm Rebecca." After he departed, I remained at my desk, contemplating the unexpected developments of the day. The Gardner Foundation partnership had accelerated beyond my projected timeline, introduced personal elements I hadn't anticipated, and created connections that transcended purely strategic considerations. Yet, rather than finding these deviations from my carefully structured plans concerning, I discovered myself intrigued by the new possibilities they presented. Perhaps James had been correct in his observation about the value of human connections that couldn't be strategically optimized or precisely quantified. My phone chimed with a message from Ali. "Just heard about the Gardner Foundation partnership acceleration. Strategic move with excellent optics for the CEO announcement. Dinner tonight to discuss implications." Her assessment wasn't incorrect. The partnership did indeed offer strategic advantages and positive perception at a crucial transition point. Yet I found myself considering it through an additional lens, one that acknowledged the genuine value of educational access beyond corporate benefit. I typed my response. "Dinner confirmed. The partnership has interesting dimensions beyond the strategic implications. Looking forward to discussing." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a sequence of meetings and decision points, each managed with my characteristic precision and thorough preparation. Yet throughout, I found my thoughts, occasionally returning to the conversation with David Grant and the unexpected connections that had emerged. His Foundation's work, his relationship with my assistant's daughter, his recognition of the personal significance behind my professional decisions, these elements existed outside my typical framework of strategic assessment, yet they felt increasingly relevant to the leadership approach I was developing for my CEO role. As I prepared to leave for the day, Jennifer appeared with a small package that had just been delivered. "This came for you personally," she explained. "Hand-delivered, rather, than through the mail system." The package was simply wrapped, its contents obviously a book from its shape and weight. The accompanying note was handwritten on heavy stationery. "Rebecca, I thought you might find this historical account of women in quantum physics relevant to our educational partnership. Eleanor's generation paved the way despite extraordinary obstacles. Their stories continue to inspire our female scholars. David." The thoughtful gesture represented another unexpected personal connection. Recognizing my mother's name and her generation's challenges, acknowledging her influence, on my perspective, offering historical context relevant to our shared educational goals. I opened the package to find a beautifully bound volume documenting the overlooked contributions of women scientists to quantum theory development. The book was clearly not a casual gift, but a thoughtfully selected resource aligning with both professional and personal interests. A slight smile crossed my face as I placed the book in my bag to read later. This developing connection with David Grant, professional collaboration layered with personal understanding, represented something new in my experience, a relationship that didn't fit neatly into my carefully categorized approach to human interaction. Not a strategic alliance, though it certainly offered strategic advantages. Not a purely professional collaboration, though professional goals were clearly central. Not a personal friendship, yet personal elements were undeniably present. Something new, something unclassified, something worth exploring further. As I left the office that evening, the setting sun illuminated the city with golden light, transforming the urban landscape into something both familiar and newly revealed. I found myself considering the path ahead with a slightly modified perspective. Still strategic, still methodical, still precisely planned, but perhaps with room for connections that couldn't be fully optimized or controlled. My upcoming CEO role would demand all the strategic precision and calculated decision-making that had characterized my career thus far. These strengths had carried me from my mother's modest apartment to the executive suite of a technology leader, had enabled me to navigate personal betrayal with minimal damage, had positioned me to assume leadership at the perfect moment in Horizon's trajectory. Yet perhaps there was value in expanding this approach to include elements that couldn't be strategically quantified. Genuine connections, unexpected alliances, relationships based on shared values rather than calculated. Advantage, a balance to be considered, a possibility to be explored, a new dimension to incorporate into my carefully constructed life. As I drove home through the gathering dusk, I found myself looking forward to the foundation visit next week with genuine interest rather than mere strategic assessment. Another slight evolution in perspective, another small adjustment to my carefully calibrated approach to life's complexities. The future stretched before me, filled with possibilities I had methodically positioned myself to embrace. CEO of Horizon Technologies, industry leader, technological visionary. Each role carefully planned, systematically achieved through strategic patience and precise execution. Yet perhaps there were possibilities I hadn't planned, connections and experiences that couldn't be strategically orchestrated but might prove valuable nonetheless. The developing partnership with David Grant and his foundation seemed to exist in this uncharted territory. Professionally advantageous, yet personally meaningful in ways I hadn't anticipated. I arrived home to find the house peaceful in the evening quiet. Moving through the rooms, I noted with satisfaction how each space perfectly reflected my preferences. The clean architectural lines, the carefully selected artwork, the furnishings, chosen for both aesthetic appeal and functional comfort. A home entirely my own, uncomplicated by compromise or accommodation of another's tastes. In my study, I poured a single glass of wine and settled into my favorite chair with the book David had sent. As I began reading about the brilliant women whose contributions to quantum physics had been systematically overlooked, I found myself thinking of my mother. Her intelligence constrained by circumstance, her potential never fully realized despite her extraordinary determination. She would have appreciated these stories of women defying expectations and overcoming barriers. She would have seen in them echoes of her own struggle and validation of her belief that education could transform lives across generations. The foundation, partnership with David, would create similar opportunities for young people facing barriers today: financial, social, systemic obstacles to educational access that limited potential and constrained possibility. The strategic advantages for Horizon were clear, but so too was the genuine impact on individual lives. Perhaps this dual perspective, strategic assessment alongside recognition of human impact, represented a more complete approach to leadership than I had previously considered. Not an abandonment of the methodical precision that had served me so well, but an expansion to include dimensions that couldn't be fully quantified or strategically optimized. As the evening deepened around me, I found myself contemplating this evolution with unexpected openness. The path ahead remained carefully mapped, systematically prepared, and strategically sound. But perhaps it might also include elements I hadn't planned for: genuine connections, unexpected alliances, and relationships valued for more than their strategic advantage. A new chapter indeed, with possibilities both carefully structured and surprisingly uncharted. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.